Yeah, why is the top down? I'm fucking freezing. Welcome, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by, coming your way to review an unlikely movie for this channel. One wouldn't think I would review this movie on this channel, but since since I've recently revisited it, and then that made me want to actually buy the Blu-ray, which actually looks amazing. This won't be a Blu-ray review, but I can simply say the Blu-ray does look amazing. In case anyone who hasn't seen the Blu-ray is wondering, coming at you to review Steven Spielberg's epic Schindler's List. So my history with this movie actually goes all the way back to its theatrical release. I looked it up. I thought it was like December or November or December of '93. I looked it up, and I guess this came out in February, early February of '94. I remember it being cold, so that makes sense, but I thought this was like a holiday release, which I was going to actually make fun of, because this Christmas, take your family to. But since it didn't come out for the holidays, I can't make that joke. I kind of made it anyway, but I guess it came out in February 1994. And I did actually end up going to the theater to see this, and I think it was mostly because, like, it was black and white, and what's interesting is there were at least two big, Hollywood productions in '94 that came out, and this was the first of the two of them. The next one that would come out would be near the fall, I think, of '94, which would be Tim Burton's Ed Wood. And there was this thing going on at the time, and even Woody Allen did it in, was it '91 or '92 with Shadows and Fog. There was this thing going on around this time where there was, very interestingly, I was going to say a decent amount. I guess it's really two or three movies isn't really that big of a, maybe there was more that I'm aware of, but what I'm trying to say is there was a decent amount of movies, or more than normal, I guess I should say, of black and white films coming out around this time, early to mid '90s and things. And being at the time, I was really getting into it, and me and buddies at the time, or I should say acquaintances at the time, were just about to get into making shorts on Super 8 black and white, Super 8 millimeter film in black and white. That would happen in like the fall of '94. So I was just really, this is really a time in my life where I was really getting interested in, and more serious and interested in filmmaking. And honestly, if this movie hadn't have been black and white, I probably would have, or had not have been black and white, I probably wouldn't have had any interest to see it in the theater. I think the only reason I saw it in the theater is because it was black and white. Obviously, my dad was kind of a big fan of like World War I and World War II, so obviously he was going to see it. I'm not going to say basically anything about this, what this movie's about. I'm pretty sure absolutely everyone knows what this movie's about. I'll mostly be commenting on just, I guess, more or less how I feel the movie is competently, and I guess just commenting more on like the production and in more of a technical maybe standpoint, and just how I feel. I guess it's kind of a review, but like I say, I'm not going to dabble into any of the subject matter. And it's interesting that when it came out on home video, I got the Laserdisc at the time. Then I think at some point I sold it, because it just got so to a point where I didn't need to really see see this movie anymore. And then I actually bought a used Laserdisc later on, and my history with this movie is kind of off and on because of obviously the depressing nature of the movie. And interestingly, it was like, I think the DVD came out in '04 or something, and my dad and I bought, maybe he paid for it, bought the DVD, but intending to watch it. And like on our surround, we didn't have a projector at the time, but maybe we bought it when we did have the projector. But we had the surround sound 5.1, and intending, because I'd never seen it in 5.1, and intending to watch it. And alas, we'd never, I don't think I even opened it. Like it would never end up being watched, the DVD would never end up being watched by me and my dad. And he has since departed, so he will never be able to see the DVD in the 5.1 surround. But I kind of have an interesting history, off-on history with this movie, where I bought it, sold it, rebought it, then we bought the DVD. I never watched it until maybe 10 years after I bought it, and then watching the DVD made me want to get a used Blu-ray. So it's just a really strange and sordid history, because this is kind of a movie that it's like part of you is drawn to it, and I think mostly because of the beautiful black and white photography. And there are scenes that are very elegant and really well done. And I mean, let's face it, I mean, the majority of it is really well done, but then there's obviously stuff that is not so elegant and you know, not so, you know, fun to behold and watch and stuff. So it is like I wouldn't say a love-hate relationship, like a like-dislike relationship with me in this movie over the years. And what I think is interesting about this movie is there's at least two people in the movie, there could be more, but at least two people in this movie were previously in Sam Raimi movies. Obviously, Liam Neeson was the headliner in the 1990 film Darkman, directed by Sam Raimi. So I knew Liam Neeson from basically from Darkman. I think that was the first thing I'd ever really seen Liam Neeson in. And then strangely, not long after, whatever the hell her name is, would be featured as the love interest in Army of Darkness, she'd go on to another Sam Raimi film, the actually Sam Raimi film that followed Darkman. She'd go on to be the woman in this movie as well. So it's kind of weird how it's like, you know, Spielberg watching a lot of Sam Raimi movies, possibly, but just an interesting side note. I would imagine when we saw this, the theater was relatively packed, and it's weird to see a depressing movie like this, and you know, surrounded by a whole bunch of other people. I can't really remember the reaction other than when you every now and then when like a humorous moment, and those were really appreciated, by the way, with like the subject matter of this kind of a movie. But when the unexpected humorous moment would come around, you could feel like there is this huge relief of like tension in the whole theater when something funny would happen, like the you know, looking for the secretary, and even that one scene where the guns won't work, and that was just like one of the most unlikely humorous scenes that especially after what's already happened in the movie up to that point, the gun not working, or the guns not working scene. It is really interesting how the humor, you know, gets slipped into a movie with this grim of subject matter, I guess I should say. But let's face it, like the movie, because of its black and whiteness, and this is just what I'm saying, like, and I've been saying all along, like, just because they invented color movies doesn't mean black and white movies should have been stopped being made, because this is a perfect example of just how beautiful black and white movies are. And I mean, it's just so apparent, like in the opening scene with the contrast of Oscar Schindler getting his money out of the drawers and putting the watch on the money and the radio, and I think he's smoking, and you know, the drink, and just like the music in the background, like, so the movie starts so elegant, and then that restaurant, you know, place, and you know, whatever it is, a nightclub at the very beginning of the movie, and just the music and stuff. The movie just opens so elegantly and beautifully with the music and the cinematography and what's going on, and this Oscar Schindler just, you know, over the course of the evening at this restaurant slash dance place or whatever, just basically drawing in everyone that's there, and basically in order to drawing in the German army or whatever to get all chummy with the German army. This guy's basically whatever, he's gonna profiteer on the war, basically, by doing this and that and getting the cheapest labor he can get to have pots and pans made. And that's the premise of this movie. Oscar Schindler just is this war profiteer who basically gets, as I said, the cheapest labor he can find, and over the course of the movie gets kind of, you know, chummy with the labor, if you will. And the whole point, you know, the whole premise of this movie is just how he ends up making a whole, you know, bunch of money, and ends up spending it all on basically just saving the people that worked for him. And also, not only that, but also having them come, he bought them to come work at his factory until the war ended, so that they would be like protected. So then once the war was over and his business was over, and then he was, all of a sudden, it was kind of like a reversal of the situation. His employees were the people that needed to be protected, and then when the war was over at the end, his employees are fine and he needs to be protected. And so kind of interesting, but a 3-hour movie basically about that and other events that go on. And one thing I will say, is I can remember sitting in the theater at this time in my life. Was I 18 years old? I might have been 18, but you know, been a movie fan from a very young age, and at this age, you know, just becoming, you know, every month and every week and every year more and more of a movie fan, and always appreciating, ever since I was a little kid. I can remember sitting, you know, on the floor watching. We just got some fast food, Racks. If you've never heard of Racks, it's no longer in Minnesota, I don't think, but I think there still are some Racks fast food restaurants in the country. We actually liked Racks, but I can still remember getting Racks. Is it R-A-X? How the hell do you spell it? Probably R-A-X. And coming home and flipping on the TV and just seeing, I mean, I didn't know, I don't think I knew it was on, but, you know, flipping the channels and coming across King Kong 1933, and this, I was probably 10 or 11 years old, and that was the first time I think I ever saw any of that, and absolutely just falling in love with it. I really think if there's something to like reincarnation, I definitely had an impressionable life back in the first half of the 20th century, because I mean, ever since I was exposed to stuff like from the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, I just gravitate towards it, which is probably another reason I actually like this movie, is because despite the subject matter, it takes place in an era that I love, and it's also really awesome to be shot in black and white and presented it in that way. And as I said, just what I was getting at is the way the movie opens, with the images and the music and the elegance, and, you know, Oskar Schindler dominating the room. It starts off on a really, really strong point. And like any movie, I mean, as it goes on for the 3 hours, it's got its highs and its lows. I'm not going to frickin' recount my, you know, opinion of every high and low of its movie. I've already told you the basic gist of the movie, and he's a war profiteer and ends up getting, I've already told you what it's more or less about without getting into too much of the nitty gritty. But what I was going to say is that I think this movie was like is it Ray Fiennes, I want to say, is the bad guy. We'll just call him the bad guy for lack of a better term. I think that's the name of the actor, and I want to say this is like his breakout role. You know, maybe he's been in stuff before, but this is, you know, probably his breakout role. And I remember really being taken by him more his appearance actually than like his performance, because his performance ain't that big a deal. It was more like just the appearance I thought was really interesting. And is he British? I think he might be British, and, you know, honestly, for being cast as a German, he actually, if he's British, he looks British, and if he's not British, he still looks British. But I you know, I remember somehow, even though it was pre-internet at the time, or pre-internet for, yeah, pretty much me and everyone I knew, somehow I knew that this is, you know, like, ooh, this breakout, or this guy's breakout role or whatever, Ray Fiennes, and they're making a big deal about him and things. And I think, you know, pretty much, I think like Liam Neeson and Ray Fiennes were like, I mean, obviously there's other people in it, but I mean, in a way, they're like the two main characters, and kind of, you know, they end up head to head or whatever. And obviously Oskar Schindler Oskar Schindler in this movie is sure gets what he wants, but I guess that can happen if you're a tall, imposing guy. But I will say Liam Neeson, you know, does a great job in the role. And like I say, I can't stress enough how just elegant, even some of the you know, non-enjoyable scenes are just look so great in black and white. And honestly, Spielberg probably got away with a lot of the on-screen violence because of the fact that it was black and white. And they probably would have let him get away with it anyway, because, you know, when you've got a movie with, you know, this, when it's about this, you can get a special pass. As a matter of fact, while I was still in high school, this movie would end up airing on broadcast television, and I'm pretty sure, don't quote me, but I want to say, and I would imagine they make viewer discretion whatever every time they, you know what, they might have not even had commercials. I can't remember, but I can remember this being on like broadcast television in maybe 90, would it have been 94, 95? I don't know. But I'm pretty sure it was like uncut, like as it is in its theatrical version, completely uncut, because like I say, the subject matter, you know how there's rules for certain things, but then, you know, across the board, but certain things, if certain things, the rules don't apply, if you know what I mean. So I'm pretty sure that this played unaltered on broadcast television, obviously most likely with strict, of course if parents aren't home and kids are watching by themselves, that's the strict viewer discretion, and advisories aren't going to really help or anything. But I'm pretty sure that there was some class, when I was in high school, that some teacher taped it off TV and then they played it for the frickin' class, and it's just like, I didn't have a problem with it because I'd rather watch a movie in school, than do any of the school stuff. So, but I felt bad for some of the kids who might, I knew it was a movie and whatever, but might be affected or wouldn't ordinarily see a movie like this. It's just really shitty to show something like this to, basically make the class. Maybe kids could, part of me is wondering if the kids had the option to not watch it. Probably if they didn't want to or whatever, but I just have this distinct recollection that this aired on broadcast television unaltered and possibly without commercials. I'm not 100% sure, and I think that version was played in like the classroom or whatever. And like if it's unaltered, why tape it off TV? Why not just buy the cassette or whatever? But whatever. I'm getting off on all kinds of other stuff, but I pretty much said my piece about the movie. More or less a solid effort, a solid movie. There are bits and pieces of this movie, like the very end, that I think are like completely, like the movie's mostly competent and solid effort. Again, not being interested in the subject matter, mind you, but there's things about the movie that, as I said, just the era that it takes place in, the elegance of the way it looks in black and white, and the music, and Liam Neeson's fun, Ray Fiennes is fun, John Williams, interesting music. I actually do have the soundtrack CD that came out, at the same time or whatever. So, it's really funny how how I've had this like-dislike relationship with this movie over the years, and honestly, I hadn't even really probably seen it in over maybe a decade or more. So it's just, I've had a really strange relationship with this movie over the years. And before I end the review, I will comment on some of the things I think is so lame, as toward the very end of the movie when it's like, whatever, Oscar's gonna drive away in his, in his little frickin' jailhouse garb with his wife, and just the melodramatic scene of like giving him the ring and the bullshit of him dropping it and looking for it. And I guess what I just regard as like melodrama, but you make a movie for the masses, and you have an expectation of what the masses, I don't know. It's just the Spielberg melodrama. Oh shit, I almost forgot to mention something, that it's interesting that Stanley Kubrick, from what I understand, was also working on a movie with a similar, basically a Stanley Kubrick version of this movie. I want to say it was called the Aryan Papers or something. And what's really funny is, while Stanley Kubrick, from what I understand, while Kubrick was, prepping or writing his movie, and in the time it took him to just write a few pages, Steven Spielberg, did pre-production, production, and got his movie done in the time it took Stanley Kubrick to do 20 pages of the Aryan Papers. But obviously when Spielberg tackled this topic, and I'm pretty sure Kubrick shelved his version, much like he wasn't going to do another Platoon and Full Metal Jacket right after. He's not going to do that again, so hell with it. But incidentally, I don't know if Aryan Papers was going to be very similar or whatever. I mean, it's funny how both titles refer to Schindler's List, Aryan Papers, they both feature like a list on paper or whatever. So I don't know if it was about the same thing or something similar, but incidentally, I mean, we can all assume that Aryan Papers probably would have been a better film than Schindler's List. But I'll give it to Spielberg, with the exception of the ending. I just wince at every time it happens when he drops the ring. Like, there's no actually good reason for him to drop the ring. Like, he's holding it and it's just like all of a sudden his hands start shaking and it drops it. Like, if you had someone like say, "Hey, Oscar," or something, and he's like, "Huh," and drops it, it'd be more believable. But just to have him holding it and just like, "Oh, I'm gonna drop it just so I can portray to the audience how much this ring means to me, so I'm going to hurriedly look for it in the rocks and just the whole thing. I guess because I already heard Liam Neeson cry as Darkman, you know, like, give me back my hand. So like to hear him cry, like, I could have saved one more. Like I just think that it's just a shame that like the movie is mostly relatively competent, and then like at the end is just like this melodrama overload that's just like puts it in kindergarten class, and it's just like, but that's just me. I mean, your average person, you know, I'm not going to say that the scene isn't touching. Like up until he drops the ring, I'm on board with the scene. Like the thing that they, you know, the workers wrote and having everyone sign it was touching, and the ring presenting it was touching. But then I was on board up until he dropped it, and he's like looking for it, and it's just like, oh my God. And the scene just, you know, kind of falls apart after that for me. But what would my star rating be for Schindler's List? I guess I can go as high as 3 stars out of 4 stars for Schindler's List, a movie that, as I've already mentioned, I've just had a really strange relationship with over the years, and saw in the theater. So I got to experience it in the theater, and I can just remember being so jealous as like a would-be movie maker, or a would-be wannabe movie maker at the time, seeing this unbelievably at the very beginning of the movie elegant black and white photography, and in the way that I can just remember when those pictures are being taken, and Liam Neeson, I don't know, he's just sitting there with a cigarette, and the pictures are being taken, and there's the tracking shot of him, and the flash, flash, flash. And it's just like the music, and he's just like, it's so freaking technically well done, and I was just so jealous, like, oh, I want to do something like this, you know, what Steven Spielberg did with this movie. I was just so jealous as a wannabe filmmaker, and just like, you know, appreciating this, you know, well done stuff, and at the same time just being jealous. And I mean, glad that someone did it, I guess. But I guess that'll pretty much be my review of the movie. Oh, another scene in closing, another bit that I thought was just goofy, but I guess this just is more of an in-depth view into like the Ray Fiennes character, and also the power that Oscar Schindler had in whatever, hypnotism or whatever the hell he did. But, you know, obviously we know the Ray Fiennes character was notorious for just shooting people left and right and up and down and circular and any which way but loose. And then there was that scene where, you know, the Oscar Schindler had a talk with him, and he's like, you know, real power is actually not killing all these people. And then for a while, you know, the Ray Fiennes character was not killing people, and it's like, I pardon you. But you could tell every time he did it, he was just like, ah, like inside he had this internal conflict, like he just wanted to blast a hole instead. And that became, I mean, even though it didn't go on for very long, what was kind of dumb and Spielbergian in a bad way was like right after Liam Neeson says, you know, that this is power to pardon him, then we would go on to the scene, of course, or a couple scenes right immediately following, where of course Ray Fiennes has to start pardoning people. And that was another bit that I thought was a little cookie cutter, like, okay, this is the part of the movie where we're just gonna, I don't know, devote to, you know, this character trying this pardoning thing on for size, and alas, he would end up, you know, reverting back to his normal ways, you know, in a scene that luckily they didn't show. They kind of showed, not directly or whatever. I won't comment on exactly. If you've seen if you're familiar with the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, you know, all in all, it's a strange movie because, you know, the subject matter doesn't interest me, but it's kind of like one of these movies that, even though the subject matter doesn't really interest me, there's so much going on in this movie, basically, technically, visually, sound-wise, music. Just, I love, you know, Liam Neeson and Ray Fiennes is great in this movie, and all the little bits and pieces. And let's face it, the comedy, the little humorous bits are actually, you know, I think is really well done, competent humor. And like I say, when you've got a movie with such gruesome subject matter, even the slightest bit of humor just seems like so funny because it's just such a gruesome movie. But anyway, I think I'm kind of saying things over and over. Thank you very much for watching this review. Hope you guys enjoyed. And as always, we'll catch you on the next video.